Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is David Fleck and I'm the Programs Officer here at the London School of Public Relations. We'll be joined today by Susan Croft, one of LSPR's senior trainers in brand management and strategy. Susan sits on the advisory board at LSPR and trains professionals in both the United Kingdom and the United States. Today, Susan will be discussing how to construct a business narrative that is memorable and can effectively inspire and influence others. I will see you all at question time, but for now, it's time to hand it over to Susan.
Thank you so much, David, and a very warm welcome to all of you. It's delightful for me to be with you today to talk about the art of storytelling. So let's get started. And I'd like now to cover the goals for this course. So we have two key goals in this webinar. First of all, to help you apply the art of storytelling in order to reach and engage your audiences. And secondly, to enhance your talks and presentations through effective storytelling techniques, which will help you reach your communications objectives. This is a very practical program, and I will be sharing some tips and techniques that I hope you'll be able to apply immediately. We're going to be talking about what makes a great storyteller and what makes a great story. But before we do that, I'd like to start with a little poll, which I think is probably quite relevant to everybody right now. So let's just open that poll and okay, so since the lockdown, how many of you have had four-legged co-workers? How many of you have four-legged co-workers? Let's have a look. Great. Oh gosh, yeah. So a third of you have a cat, a dog, a hamster, a rabbit, and a few of you as well, a couple of you are planning to get one. That's great. I have two Cocker Spaniels called Biscuit and Coco, and I can't tell you how wonderful they've been to me. They really help with my filing, and here's a photograph of them, so we will stop sharing our results and you can have a look at them. They really help with my filing by going onto my desk and taking all the papers off and strewing them all over the floor, chewing the edges, which I think gives new meaning to the term, the dog ate my homework. So if we can remove that poll, there we are, there are my dogs. All right, so thank you so much. Now I'd like to move on, and I'd like you to write in the Q&A any characteristics that you can think of that make a great story. Thank you, Dalal. What are the characteristics that make for a great story? Let's have a look and see what people are saying. I see we have people from all over the world. A funny story, absolutely. Yes, it's great if you can use humor. And you're absolutely right, Yvonne. You need to have interesting characters, characters that your audience can relate to. And the best character for your story is usually yourself or someone that audience knows. Excellent. You need a hook, absolutely. Very good. So people are really weighing in. It's relatable, shareable, memorable. There's suspense. It relates to common issues, fluidity. Great. Nice plot, compelling. And some wonderful points. You do need a protagonist, a goal, a struggle. Yeah, we're going to be talking about that kind of story. And good scene setting and reliable protagonist, sometimes you need conflict, humor. The hero's journey, Caroline, that's interesting. I'm going to talk about that, that narrative pattern first of all. Excellent. So thank you very much, my friends, for doing that. And now let's look at what are the key elements or the characteristics of a great storyteller. So that's about how you tell your story. What do you need to do to be a great storyteller? Let's have a look and see what people say here. I'm so glad that you're contributing. It's great to hear your views. Just wait to see what people are saying. You need to be engaging, absolutely. We'll look at how do you engage an audience. What else do you need to be a great storyteller? Well, while you're thinking, I would say passion, enthusiasm, a good speaking voice. People need to be able to hear you as well as understand what you're saying, and inviting your audience to bear witness, says Caroline. And Rosamond is saying you need to be genuine. Great points. These are great points. Thank you very much indeed. Do carry on entering your thoughts as we go in, but we're now going to be looking at another aspect of this. So, another poll, my friends. I'd like to know whether you regularly include stories in your presentations, your talks, your communication. Please answer yes, always, or sometimes, or rarely, or never. Let's just get a feel for this. Right, so we have a fairly small percentage that always do, and that's great. I hope you'll get some more inspiration from this webinar. About half of you sometimes do, that's very encouraging, but quite a few of you rarely do, and a few of you never do. So I'm really hoping that those of you who rarely or never do will get inspiration, particularly from this program. And those who sometimes do will perhaps do more often. And those of you who always do, you'll maybe think of some new kinds of stories. All right, so thank you very much. And now we're going to be moving on to an important aspect of delivery. And that's essentially understanding what your audience is listening to. So this is how you show up in the situation. And when you speak in public, you speak with more than just your mouth. And it's also about what you're saying and how you're saying it. And that can be demonstrated through your hands, your hand gesture, your eye contact. That's usually very important in presenting, is that you are looking at your audience. Your feet, maybe you move around a little bit, maybe you move towards your audience when you really want to make a point, and you use your mouth. In fact, you use your whole body. And that's something I really would like you to think about, is how I can present in a dynamic, positive way, using facial expressions, eye contact, good hand gestures, movement, if that's possible in the situation, and essentially my demeanor, shoulders back, neck up, and head facing your audience. By the way, all of these things help you build confidence and show confidence to your audience. I'd like now to take you to another aspect of this. It's very, very interesting, and it's how we establish trust and credibility when we are engaging in communication with other people. And there was a very interesting study. It was carried out at UCLA in Southern California by social scientist Albert Moravian. And he and his team, under really strict clinical conditions over a long period of time, looked at how messages are received and how we as individuals, no matter where we are in the world, no matter what backgrounds we have, no matter what language we speak, how we instill credibility, engageability, trust. And the team of social scientists broke down messages into 3 areas. The first is verbal, and these are the actual words you speak. The syntax, the vocabulary, the nouns, the adjectives, the utterances that are coming from your mouth. The next is vocal, and this is how your voice sounds, your cadence, the tonal quality of those words, whether you're speaking in a very loud voice or a very soft voice. Is there any emotion coming through? And that's your vocal. And finally, we have visual, and this is the non-spoken language. Your eye contact or lack of eye contact, hand gestures, how you're standing, how you're seated. And all of these 3 contribute to trust, credibility, and engageability. So please, would you take a moment? We're going to bring up another poll. I'd like you to write down your percentages for verbal, vocal, and visual. All right? So we're going to start with verbal. How much of communication do you think is verbal? And you can see the poll here, 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and so on. So let's see what people think on verbal. Very interesting. All right, so let's have a look at this. Let's see what you say. So 13% think it's between 10 and 20. I'm sorry if you're having trouble submitting. I don't know what we can do about that, but keep trying. We have quite a large percentage who are saying about 20 to 30%. Slightly less are saying 30 to 40. And we have a few who are saying higher. Interestingly, 9% of you are saying between 70 and 80%. That's interesting. No one is saying between 90 and 100 though. All right, so let's remember those percentages. Now let's move to vocal. Let's see what you say about vocal, please. We'll bring up another poll on vocal.
Hi, Susan. Just the poll is actually, all 3 questions are within the same poll, so you just need to scroll down.
Oh, I see. Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so vocal. You've already been doing that. That's very good. So a few are saying 10 to 20. A good 30%, both 20 to 30 or 30 to 40. And we have a few saying 40 to 50. A few who think vocal is very important, 50 to 60, 60, 70, or 70 to 80. But again, there is a wide difference, isn't there here? Now let's move to visual, the non-spoken language. You're ahead of me here, so people are already voting on this. What do we think about visual? And again, we have a wide variety. Interestingly, the largest percentages are saying 30 to 40, and then that's followed by between 50 and 80. And all right, so again, we have a big difference in what the poll is saying and what you're saying. So thank you. All right, so now I'm going to give you the answers to this. I think you're going to be very surprised. So look here, verbal 7%, vocal 38%, and visual 55%. But I do want to say this, the Moravian study did not suggest that verbal is unimportant. Of course, what you say is critically important. But what the study said is that if your words are incongruent with your tone of voice, so out of step with your tone of voice and your body language, people are going to be putting more emphasis, more belief in what they're seeing and hearing rather than the words. And I think that's very important in storytelling. Now, one other thing I'd like to cover in another pie chart is what happens when we take visual away. You may be telling stories, communicating by phone, webinar, Skype, Zoom, where you can't really be seen. Your body language can't be read. And here you see how important vocal becomes. Vocal is incredibly important in that scenario. Excellent. Well, let's now move on to the core of this program. And I'm going to be talking about narrative patterns. And these are story structures that add impact, drama, and imagination to your stories. And these are used also by great public speakers, presenters, who really find that they enhance their communication. They really engage the audience. And it's always helpful if if you can listen to some of these stories. And later on, or as we go through, I will be referring to some very interesting examples. So let's now take a look at these patterns. And essentially, there are 8 narrative patterns: monomyth, mountain, nested loops, sparklines, in media res, converging ideas, false start, and petal structure. In our 45 minutes together, we don't have enough time to go through all of those. But if you were to come on the full day program at the LSPR, we would certainly be doing that, and we'd also be writing some stories. But I'd just like to cover with you now and inspire you with 4 of them: monomyth, sparklines, in media res, and false start. So let's start with monomyth. And I think it was Caroline in the text chat who said it's about the hero's journey. And that is exactly what this is. It's where you set a hero at the heart of your story, who sets out on a difficult journey, and they overcome great challenges and trials. But at the end, they are rewarded with newfound wisdom, something they've learned and they can share with their community. And lots of modern stories today and movies still follow this structure, from The Lion King to Star Wars, for example. So we want to be able to share that newfound wisdom. So this is a great structure to take your audience on a journey, to show the benefits as well of taking risks, and to demonstrate what you've learned from it that you want to share with that audience. And I'd like to give you a working example of this, of where I've used this. I often have to address young people, graduates, new recruits who are joining organizations, coming into the workplace. They're often quite worried, a little nervous. And I tell them about my own personal journey. So essentially, I put myself in as the heroine. And like many people do when they're talking to younger people, they want to inspire them. They talk about, my humble beginnings. I was the first person in my family that went to college, university. And then I got my first break and I found a mentor, and the mentor helped me. And then, unfortunately, I had a very big upset because I lost my job. I was made redundant. And during this period of time, I reflected on my life and I decided that I was going to start my own business. And this is what I did. So that's the way you tell the monomyth, the hero's journey. And there's a great example of a TED Talk, My Journey to Yo-Yo Mastery. This will be in the resources that you will receive after this webinar, and it's really well worth looking at. Let's now move to the second narrative pattern, which are called Sparklines. And this is a way of actually mapping a presentation. There's a great example in a TED Talk by Nancy Duarte, who talks about the secrets of great and the structure of great communication. Well worth looking at Nancy Duarte, by the way. And she uses Sparklines to analyze famous speeches. And she wrote a book called Resonate, where she goes into more detail on this. And she argues that the very best speeches succeed because they contrast our ordinary, problem-filled world with an ideal and improved world, and creates and fuels a desire for change, a sense of excitement in the audience. And this is a highly emotional technique, my friends. And it's sure, if you use it properly, it's sure to motivate your audience. So it's very good for inspiring an audience to action. It's probably a very good thing to do if you are leading a team and you really want your team to achieve great goals. It creates hope, it creates excitement. And there's a great example of this in the great presentation that Steve Jobs did when he introduced the iPhone, become a seminal presentation in history, I think way back in 2007, and where he compares what is, what we've had to put up with in terms of cell technology to what can be. And obviously what can be is that great iPhone. And it was an incredible presentation, and he tells stories throughout, and it's well worth looking at. So in terms of another reference, coming on to the next slide, the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King is an incredible example of using Sparklines. So let that inspire you. Let's move now to the next narrative pattern. It's called In Media Res. And this is where you begin your narrative in the heat of the action, before actually explaining how you got there. So you're dropping your audience into the most exciting part of the story. And when you grip your audience from the beginning, they usually stay with you throughout, especially if you use the right body language and the right tone of voice. But I'd have to say this only works for your shorter presentations. And if you string it out too long, you're going to lose people's interest. They're going to get distracted. So this is a good pattern to include in a story for getting attention from the get-go, for keeping your audience engaged. They'll be looking with you for a resolution. What did you do? How did you get out of this? So it essentially focuses on a pivotal moment. And I'll give you an example of where I've used this. In debriefing on a meeting I had with a client, there's my team. I'm talking about a regular meeting I had with a client, a little bit, well, routine, a bit ho-hum. But I use in media res, and I say, suddenly I found myself walking with the client outside, walking through the grounds of her company. And we came to a pathway that diverged left or right. And at that point, she said a most remarkable thing to me. Now, I would hope that that would be getting my audience, my team, on the edge of their seats, because I dropped them right into the heart. What is this remarkable thing? Why were you outside with the client? Tell us more. This is exciting. And again, there's a very good example of this. Another TED Talk by Zach Abraham, I am the son of a terrorist. And he drops us right into the middle. And finally, false start. And this is where you begin to tell a seemingly predictable story before disrupting it and starting all over again. So essentially, you're luring your audience into a false sense of security. You know, oh yes, so this is going to be just another update on the project. But then you turn the tables on them. It's a great format for talking about a time when you might have failed and forced to go back to the start. And it's ideal for talking about things that you learned from that experience, the creative way that you may have solved a problem. And it's a great way to get that attention. It disrupts your audience's expectations and it engages them. So you might start by giving a presentation and you might say, you probably thought that in this talk, I was going to talk about some of the great successes that we've had on this project. But no, I'm actually going to talk about some of the failures and the things we learned from that. So this is now, oh, gosh, wow. This is the gosh, wow moment. And a good example, another TED Talk to consider, is by J.K. Rowling, where she is addressing a Harvard commencement. She's got an audience of thousands. She's very nervous. It's a great talk, for example, for humor. She's very funny. She engages her audience from the beginning and she surprises them. She turns the table and she uses that very useful false start narrative. So thank you so much. I'd like now to ask you to do one final poll. Which of those 4 patterns do you like best? Which ones do you think you might use in the future? Very good. So it looks like Sparklines is the winner, but the other 3 are in very close seconds. So I think these narrative patterns have appealed to everybody, which is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So some TED Talks to listen to. When you have some time, the ones that, of course, I've mentioned, but there's also a great one, Steve Jobs, his Stanford commencement address. He tells 3 stories from his life in that. It's about a 30-minute talk and very worth listening to Steve Jobs. Andrew Stanton, who is the Hollywood film director, he directed, I think, Finding Nemo, worked for Pixar, and he talks about the clues to a great story. Good talk as well. And then I mentioned earlier Nancy Duarte, The Secret Structure of Great Talks. It's been my great pleasure talking to you today on behalf of the London School of Public Relations, and we can now open it up to questions.
I just firstly just like to say thank you for taking us through everything today. It was really fascinating to hear the amount of narratives that you can use in storytelling. It's a shame that we could only go through 4, because I'm sure that the other 4 were just as fascinating. We've just been asked by a member of the audience, how do you get inspiration for your storytelling?
Now that's a great question. I shall be brief so we can get lots of questions in. Well, I've had a lot of experience through my life. And I guess one of the good things, there are very few good things about getting older, is that you meet a lot of people, you do a lot of jobs, you get a lot of skills. I've traveled widely and I've read widely. And I think this has really opened up my horizons. And wherever I go, whoever I speak to, I'm always looking for their stories. I'm always looking for a great story. So it's about broadening horizons.
Thanks, thank you. The next question we have is coming by quite a few people, actually. They're asking, how do you tell a brand story that makes your audience take action? So how can you tell a story as a brand?
Well, I think one of the first things, and I teach this in my brand management class, is to really understand the history of your brand. And some of you will work for organizations or clients who have a lot of history. Maybe the brand has been around 10, 20, perhaps even 50 years. Look to see what were the origins of that brand. How did it come to life? How did it change and adapt over the years? And the more you look at the history, the more you can think about stories and also key brand messages that can bring that brand to life. And I noted, yes, thank you. Yes, Helena, we do run a full day course on storytelling. And we will talk about bringing brands to life in that class. Great question.
Wonderful. So we've had a question, how do you structure a story and link it to personal branding?
And link it to personal branding. That's interesting, isn't it? That's another topic that I'm very interested in. Some people don't like the term personal branding. They think it's too manipulative, commercial, but it's no doubt that we do have to work on our personal impressions, how we come across to others. I think one story you could tell might be a very personal story of how maybe your personal brand has changed over the years. I know my own has. When I left college, I can remember, I had different values to the ones I have today. I communicated differently. I had far less experience. My image was very different. I was much more sort of boho in those days. But I've learned over the course of my career to change that, to really resonate with my clients, with my audiences, and to essentially look the part. So tell a personal story around your brand, your personal brand. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question has come in asking how to humanize corporate communications instead of just being informative.
Well, telling a story is just a great way to do that. We really do need to humanize our presentations. So many of us rely on, data, statistics, the same old information, PowerPoint slides, one after the other after the other. And people get bored with that. We use them in meetings. You can bring alive a presentation, a PowerPoint, a meeting by, just going off track a little bit, saying, before we start this, I'd like to tell you a quick story. Last week, I was visiting my great aunt, and she used to work in retail. And, you take them through some of the wisdom maybe that your great aunt imparted that might be appropriate and will resonate with your audience today. I can't tell you, people love that because it humanizes the story and the message, and it humanizes you. It takes down the kind of professional guard that we tend to have when we are talking to others, the job title, and reveals the human being.
Thanks. So I guess that we've had a few questions that have kind of similar. They've come in and asked, should we include stories in formal presentations? So I would assume the answer is yes on that. There's also one specifically asking, in a scientific context, in lectures, seminars, to avoid boredom, would you recommend telling a story, especially if you're addressing a non-scientific audience?
Absolutely. Again, yes, yes, yes. I run a lot of face-to-face conferences, meetings, trainings. I also do a lot of virtual training, and I always like to tell a story. Sometimes, if it's a whole day training, I may tell more than one or two, and I encourage others to do that. Even in their introductions, if we have enough time, and not, you know, you can't do this with the 50 people, but you could do it with 6. You know, when you're introducing yourself, tell us a little story about your life. Very quickly, you know, 6, 7 sentences, 2 minutes. So definitely you can.
Perfect. We have a question asked by Anna. She's asked, does everything that you're speaking about today apply for written communications, or is this mostly for oral?
What a great question. Well, of course, we focused on oral, verbal communication today, but absolutely, you could use this in writing. I think you have to approach it in a slightly different way. You know, and make it really short, but I can see how you might include this in an email, a proposal, a research document, a white paper, but I think it needs to be short, sweet, and incredibly relevant to the subject. Thank you.
Susan, can the story of a founder be a good narrative to use for a brand?
Oh, yes. That's where you'll find some fabulous stories. When you think of founders from history, for example, or founders who are still currently there, I'm thinking, for example, some founders that have an incredible impact on their brand. Richard Branson, for example, has a great story because he's such a colorful character. And I'm just trying to think of others. The CEO of GE, can't remember his name now, forgive me, but there are lots of great stories with the founders of the organization, and well worth looking at their history. How did Alexander Bell, for example, had a great, great story there.
Fantastic. Just another question. We're just going to go back to when you mentioned storytelling during a formal presentation is a great idea. Obviously, that's what this entire seminar is about. What happens if there's a really tight time limit, say 10 minutes? And what if you know that your board members just want facts? How do you go about livening up a short presentation when you know your audience is not really into these storytelling methods?
And don't tell a story. Speak to your audience's needs. One of the key aspects of communication is know your audience. And if you have a strong feeling, even if you've been told, you know, we want a short, succinct, well-articulated presentation that covers A, B, and C, then follow it and do that. Now, the way you can bring that presentation to life is not through telling a story and using visual imagery. It's about how you present, your enthusiasm, your tone of voice, your presentation skills. And that's what counts in that situation.
Absolutely. Susan, what would you recommend for new businesses? How would you create a narrative around a new business?
Oh, well, I think you could look at Apple's example and some of the examples of like Facebook, you know, where they had a great story. You know, you may remember that Zuckerberg created Facebook. It was called The Facebook when he was at Harvard, and then he dropped out and started the company. He had that big conflict with the twins at Harvard who claimed to have been authors of Facebook. That was a great story, turned into a movie, of course, called The Social Network. You look at Apple, how Apple started with the two Steves, Wozniak and Jobs, starting in Steve Jobs' father's garage, and how they created the first Apple computer, which I think was called the Lisa. And there's a great story. So take inspiration from other stories, and it's a great opportunity for startups.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Especially now, yeah, there's definitely room for startups to be working their way into the business space.
Yes.
Just time for one more question, and I have saved this one for last, especially. We've had a question from one of our audience members asking, what's the best way to end a speech?
Oh, okay. Well, you could end with a story. You could say something like, in conclusion, I'd just like to tell you a short story, and I have deliberately kept this to the end. Now, I can promise if you start it that way, you will have, even if they may have been distracted earlier, they'll be right back with you, hopefully on the edge of their seats. Or you don't have to end with a story, but one of the things we teach in our presentation skills class is that at the end, you summarize all the key points you've made, the key messages, and that might be through a story or just through a straightforward summary. I'd like to add one more very useful tip here. Usually at the end of a presentation, you ask for questions, and you'll take those questions, 4 or 5 minutes. But often when we've taken questions, we say, thank you very much, and we finish. But don't do that. Thank you very much. And just to recap, my key message is, so you leave them, you have the last word.
Perfect. Thank you.
And my key message is, think about incorporating stories and sign up for the class.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. That is just about all the time that we do have today, unfortunately. I really would like to take this opportunity to say thank you, Susan, for sharing your expertise with us. We hope that your insights today have helped members in the audience get a clearer view of what is needed and what can be achieved when bringing in storytelling to business communications. To our audience, thank you so much for signing up and attending today. It's been fantastic to see so many people from all around the world join in today's session, and we really hope that you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed today's session and you do want to gain a deeper understanding of storytelling, LSPR has recently launched our new one-day online course, which covers all of today's topics in more detail, as well as a lot more. You will be provided with the opportunity to write 2 to 3 narratives which are directly relevant to your brand whilst you're on the workshop, and you can take these straight back into your organisation. All of LSPR's courses are CPD accredited, and they're approached in a consultative and practical manner. Our trainers get to the heart of your problems and give you a toolbox of skills that you can take back to your organisation. Please visit our website for any more details on the upcoming storytelling course or any of our courses. And thank you so much again for your attendance today. Just a reminder that this webinar has been recorded and it will be available to you at a later date, as well as all of the resources, including the TED Talk links. We hope to see you on our next webinar, but for now, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.